Dr. Kiran Bains, welcome to the YOD pod. Not your first involvement with UK Doc, though. You were at the Liz Sizer Gala last year. I wasn't there. I missed out because I was out of the country at the time. But I heard it was an amazing evening, and you probably got a chance to meet some of the people involved with the charity, did you? And hear a little bit about it?
Yes, absolutely. It was absolutely amazing actually. So it was definitely your loss being out the country, I have to say. But it was an absolutely wonderful event for such an amazing cause. And it was nice, yeah, meeting the founder Dan, just getting to know the other people involved, and obviously the guys from Pastest, and just having a great evening, really, all around.
Well, actually, on that night, I had a FaceTime call from some of my friends who were at the event, and they were stumbling out of the event
Oh,
actually, quite
really?
late night. Yeah. Well, so that really gave me FOMO.
I
But
bet, yeah.
yeah, but great that you're back involved with UK Doc. Really good to chat to you today. Thanks very much for giving up your time. Been a
My
stressful
pleasure.
morning by the sounds of things. We were just talking before we started recording. You've been having to manhandle packages through the window and all sorts.
Oh, this is what happens when you marry somebody who just seems to forget where everything is and takes your house keys with him, and essentially locks you in the house without any means to escape. So yeah, poor postman pushing things through the front window door or the window this morning. Yeah, so he's in trouble when he gets home.
Yeah, I mean, we've only got 40 minutes, so I don't know if I can allow you enough more time to kind of unleash about your husband on this, but ma- maybe I should be holding the
For
space for
what
that.
mail? Yeah, probably more like 45 hours, but yeah.
Oh, that's harsh. That's harsh. Come on, say
Oh.
something nice about your husband.
He's a very funny man. That's yeah. Don't we all look for somebody funny part of our lives? So yeah, I think
I
that's
think that
probably.
is important. Are you very different?
We are quite different. He's not a medic, and I'm obviously a medic. He's quite relaxed, and I'm very obviously not. There's a lot of "can't you just calm down" type things going on in our house, which for some reason makes me not want to calm down. It's strange, Tom. It's really, really strange. Yeah, he's a wine
Nothing like
slut.
someone telling you to calm down to really make the rage
Yeah,
boil up, isn't there?
it definitely doesn't work, especially not with me. So yeah.
Oh, I can relate. But you, in some ways, not that everyone who comes on this podcast is bringing their own thing and bringing a huge amount of value. And we love all our guests. But actually, you are potentially the perfect guest for the podcast for
Oh
a few
gosh,
reasons.
pressure.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. You're going to have to deliver after I've said this. No, but for a few reasons. Obviously, your work with Pastest, which we'll get onto and we'll dive into that, but that makes you very qualified to be on this podcast. But also your blend of being a practicing doctor, but also your massive background in the educational side of it, combined with your personal interest and support of others in the wellbeing space. So all of that ingredients makes you a very, very suitable guest for the Odd Pod. So I'm glad we managed to get you in and get this recording done. No
Well,
pressure.
thank you for inviting me, Tom. Well, yeah, thanks. Thanks. I started to sweat now.
No, it's all good. It's chill. Well, I mean, I'm not qualified to be hosting it, and this is the second season I've done. So, hey, there are no rules on this.
Let's just see how we go.
We'll see how we go. I mentioned Pastest, so let's start there. And it's a really nice place to start because it's all the work you do with them is about education, right? And you've got
Absolutely, yeah.
a load of history around medical education. You've got a master's in medical education. I get my
Got
words
it.
right. That's always useful on a podcast from the Uni of Nottingham. And I want to dive back, not that it was that long ago. I'm sure it's fresh in your mind about your dissertation a little, because you did it on well-being of medical students, right? So it's as if you were planning for UK Doc services well in
Oh
advance.
yeah, had that insight. Absolutely, definitely.
But what initially kind of sparked your interest? Was there something you identified as being like an issue, or was it just something you were curious about?
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to kind of start because I mean, by the time I'd got to the medical education dissertation point, I was doing my master's, and I'd had a year out on maternity leave, and then got back into it. So it was a bit of a prolonged master's, really. And by that point, I'd already been in the kind of like medical education clinical job for a few years. So having had quite a high turnover of medical students, and just seeing the difficulties and I suppose it surprised me more than anything, being a mentor and a supervisor, how much mental difficulties and mental health there was, and how little at the time I could find on it or about it. Obviously, the university had their own pathways, etc., but I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And I wanted to be better. I wanted to be a better clinical supervisor for them. I mean, as much as I enjoyed doing my masters, I wanted my dissertation, 20,000 words. You want it to mean something, and you want it to be interesting for yourself as well, something that you are really passionate about. And that was it. I just knew it had to be around what I did in the clinical environment, but about well-being of medical students as well. And just starting to look at that, there was lots, in the literature, there was lots about well-being or medical student well-being, and lots about doctors' well-being within clinical environments, but not hardly anything about medical student well-being in clinical environments. And it just felt like the right thing. It felt perfect for me, actually, to dive into. And I feel like I learned a lot, but I also realized how much of a hole there is in that kind of area.
What kind of things were you seeing in medical students at the time?
Yeah,
the problems they were facing.
Yeah, a huge range of things, really. I think at the time, this was, I've been looking after medical students pre-COVID and now post-COVID, obviously. And I think if you look at there's differences, there's changes in how it's come across over the years. But certainly, I was just seeing within my group, I would see at least 20% of each group, there would be a level of mental difficulties in mental health that would require medical services. The level that could be depression, anxiety, self-harm, eating disorders, and you just think we're letting these, and that most of them, young, very young, not necessarily graduate entry medic, just thinking like they're in a hospital environment, high pressure, they've got high stresses, exams, away from their family, moving from hospital rotation to hospital rotation, different supervisors all the time. It's no wonder that pre-existing conditions or new conditions manifest themselves. What are we doing in the clinical environment to help support that? Because actually this is our future of our NHS, isn't it? Whatever that may look like. And they're the people that are going to be looking after me, my parents, my kids. We need to look after them first. So yeah, so things, huge range. I don't think they could be as one size fits all for medic. They are extremely organized, bright, educated people who've worked under high pressure environments for a long time, whether that's at school or in their jobs before they come into medicine. So they've got high expectations for themselves, and that I don't think that helps, to be honest.
Yeah.
Also, I've got my own personal health, mental health reasons. Kind of, I have diagnosis of OCD, and so that lends a personal kind of passion for it, really, and something that didn't kind of manifest until after I'd become a doctor. And actually, but looking back, can see those little patterns coming through. And just thinking, well, what would I have wanted as a medical student, as a junior doctor? What would I have wanted available to me? What would have helped? What would have, supported me? What did support me? What did help at the time when I was at my worst, really? What's enabled me to get to the position that I'm in now, which is a very happy and healthy person.
Right. It's great to hear that you have managed your own struggles around that with your life as it stands. And I guess if there is ever a silver lining to challenges we experience in our lives, whether that's physical or mental difficulties, being able to channel them into a passion where you feel like you can help others and serve others, which is exactly what you've done and are doing, is really powerful. There's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. I'll come back to the education thing in a bit, but just sticking with your own OCD diagnosis, did that during that period, and we can dive into this as much or as little as you'd like, of course, did you have to adjust your life? Because one thing that stands out about the way you described your kind of work life now, particularly, is that it feels like you very deliberately arranged it in a way that works for you. And that is not something that is that common, I think, because of for a number of reasons, external pressures, the need to want to achieve whatever it is, But is that your experience of it? Have you adapted your life to suit yourself, and part of that suiting yourself being your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very deliberate choice. So, I'm a paediatric specialty doctor, and I'm work part-time. 50% of my work is medical education with undergrad students, or before they've qualified as fully qualified doctors. And 50% of my work is clinical paediatric, and I absolutely love both parts of those. I can love it because I have the headspace and the physical space to be able to do both to a level which I feel I do a good job. And then I get to work with Pastest as well, which allows me to do the pediatric specialty kind of exam work around that. So there's no conflict of interest between the medical students and the postgraduate work. But I do it in my own time, at my own pace. So I've got a full week, but a very varied week, which is really important for me. And what I was finding when I was in training was that the night shifts they would be a source of there would be a problem, because I wasn't getting sleep, I wasn't having a regular routine, and that really would trigger my OCD. And so I had to make a choice at that time whether actually do I lose all these lose my love for being a doctor, being a pediatrician, or do I find a way to make this work? And part of it is being really brave and making that step, but part of it was just the amazing. I cannot say how much my team around me supported me to be able to do that, to look at my job plan and make that work in a way that would work for me, for my family, and allow me to be the best I can be. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. If you've got a team that is willing to do that, and you'll be willing to work with them back and give the best of yourself. So I have to admit, it takes it. There was a lot of, I was in the right team and I was surrounded by the right people. But I give myself credit. I stuck it out and I said, well, no, I need to do this for me, and if I'm going to contribute to this kind of work environment, then I need to be healthy and well. And that's a really, really hard thing to do, and especially back then, I think flexible working and different pathways are becoming a little bit more normalized. Still not there yet by any means, but it was a tricky thing to do as somebody who outwardly looked like they would continue on down the treadmill and reach whatever endpoint people think is the right one. But yeah, this is the right one for me.
It is amazing, and I can really recognize the courage in that, because as you say, sometimes it's harder as well when externally you look like someone who's doing right, who's like
absolutely,
progressing, and I think I've experienced this to a degree as well when I've not this back when I was captain of the team, because there's an expectation then that you are the kind of solid one and that you don't have to ease off and you can just keep moving forward and pushing through. And there is a point at which you kind of end up maintaining that pretense, don't you? Because you kind of put on this front, and the more people buy into that front you're presenting, the more you feel the need to keep presenting it. And it can become quite a dangerous kind of cycle that you're trying to keep up with, because, and I think a lot of people who are ambitious end up in that cycle because they think, well, people think I'm doing all right, so maybe I can just keep carrying on. But deep down, I think we all know if we're not on the right journey, or if we're struggling, we need to ask for some help, or we need to pause. And I think there are probably a lot of people who might not be able to take the steps that you took. And it's interesting you talked about the team around you, because you'd like to think everyone has a supportive team. I think there are probably a handful of cases where people don't have a great team around them, and then you've got to look at alternatives. Like, is that the right team for you to be in? Are there alternative options? But I also wonder whether people are in supportive teams, but they might not know how supportive, and actually reaching out and having the conversation with someone in that team might be the first port of call. So, explaining to someone that you're struggling a little bit and trying to find someone who you sense there might be a bit of trust with, engaging maybe what the boss might think about this, or, because I can understand it's scary going straight to the supervisor or whoever is in the authority, but I think trying to open up that conversation might reveal that there's a support around you that perhaps didn't realize. And so I just think people who are perhaps sensing that they're not on the right journey or need to make a change, I guess the first situation they need to gauge is like, is the team around me going to support the change that I need? And hopefully the answer is yes.
Yeah, no, Tom, I think you're absolutely right, and that's great. And there's a lot of parallels between the sport and the medical world. I can imagine, but sometimes you only need one person. You don't necessarily. I mean, I had a whole team, but sometimes I think it starts with telling one person or reaching out to one person, and that doesn't necessarily have to be your direct boss. It could be somebody, a peer, that can then advocate for you. And I think that's such a good point. But I think that takes some courage too. And I think as student advisors and mentors, in the position that I'm in now, I just want to, make sure that people are aware that I am there, that is something that I can be for them. Just, whether they're, within my placement at the time or they've moved on. But also signpost other people, because we've all got different personalities and we've all got different ways of approaching things, form bonds with different people. And I might not be somebody that they can necessarily feel that they can come and talk to, but I will mention, a colleague in the induction. I say, you can speak to me, but if you don't feel comfortable speaking to me, you can speak to this person, and give them somebody else that has obviously already said, yes, I'm happy for that to happen. But, I think we need to move away from this is the right person to talk to, this is somebody you should go to, this is your one person you talk to. Move away from that and say, well, actually, there's lots of people around, who are happy for you to come and approach them, who can then be that initial step, and then move from there. Because at the end of the day, we just want somebody who's struggling to say to someone that they are, and then we can work from that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably also worth saying that the right person, in inverted commas, is that kind of process you just explained also applies if you're seeking professional help. So there is not a one size fits all when it comes to reaching out to professional mental health support in whatever guise that is. And it might require, speaking to a couple of different people before you find someone that you feel is the right person to support you with whatever your mental health needs are. So I think if people are in that situation where they're reaching out for help, firstly, well done for doing so, but also don't be afraid that if the first person you reach out to is not the right person, there might be a different practitioner that's right for you.
Absolutely. That's very well put. Yeah, I think I would absolutely agree with that. Definitely.
Obviously, in your role, supporting other people and being a mentor to other people and supporting them through not only their kind of personal journeys, but also their journeys around their own education and things like that. That requires you to be, I guess, a certain person for them. I think this, again, drawing some parallels, like if you're leading people and you're supporting others, you have to keep your own, I like the phrase like about having you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to keep your own cup topped up so that you can pour for others, right? And
absolutely.
So for you, when you're working with other people, and we've talked a little bit about how you manage your career in order to achieve this to a degree, but there's some other stuff I like to kind of dive into little people's lifestyles and share those, if you're willing to, around how you keep yourself, you sustain yourself to a point where you feel you can give to others.
Well, actually, it's funny you said that, because my husband just walked in the door. That's the noise.
Well, based on what you said earlier, does that help or hinder your ability to help others?
It depends on the day. Depends on the hour, to be honest. But yeah, no, I think who you've got around you, and I would say that of my team as well. At work, I've got a fantastic team around me, but outside where I've got, I don't tell him, I say it quite quietly, but we've got quite a funny person in my husband who keeps me quite grounded. He's not a medic, but he has a
very... Is that important that he's not in the same kind of world as you in that respect?
Me, yes. And I say this with a degree of trying to be careful of how I say this, because I know a lot of medics are surrounded by medics. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I think it's a personal thing. My best friends are medics, and they were who I went to medical school with. Not all of them are, but like I would say, 2, 3 out of, probably about half of my very closest friends are. But for me, coming home and not having a medic at home, I think that's helpful for me, definitely, having that space, and just to be aware there's other things around, there's other the whole world that isn't just, you can get sucked into it, I think.
Well, that's such a big thing, isn't
Uh,
it? Even if it's not like your partner or the person you live with, having some way of maintaining perspective, I guess, is what we're talking about, isn't it? It's like taking the blinkers off a little bit and broadening your vision out to remind yourself that the world is bigger than my job, or the world is
yeah,
bigger than the shift I've just done. And sometimes that's
yeah.
really what we need. And yeah, it sounds like you get that through your relationship, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I do. But we do get on each other's nerves a lot as well. But there's
Of
lots of
course.
things. Yeah, I mean that's just marriage, I suppose. But I think there's lots of things. I've always had a love of reading, so that's certainly transporting myself. And I think again, that's what I'm just drawing the parallels. Just as I speak to you, Tom, transporting yourself to a different world that is away from medicine. So I suppose I do a lot of that with the type of books that I read. I do read a fair amount of medical mystery type stuff. But transporting myself into another world
What are you
away from
reading at the
that.
moment?
What I'm really into at the moment, so I've read all of the. Oh God, no, you put me on the spot. I've read all of the Rivers of London series, or I've listened to them at least, and I absolutely love those. So I've just come to the end of the most recent one, so I'm just trying to find some other big, like I like to read like like the Wheel of Time. I like to read, by Robert Jordan. I like to read like book after book after book of the same type, like a series essentially.
Oh, nice.
So Wheel of Time I read years ago when I was first unwell actually. And then obviously they've made a TV adaptation, the Amazon Prime one, and I really enjoyed watching that. So yeah, so moved on from that, and then just read Rivers of London. I really like Robin Hobb. I've read all of hers, so lots of fantasy around that. But then I can read like random US medical type mysteries, like Karen Slaughter, or yeah, really random. I'll pretty much read anything, huge range. But yeah,
Love it. It's
and
people
audio.
who are come for like, the medical chat and the mental health chat. You're getting book recommendations. We do it all on the Odd Pod.
Oh gosh, yeah, you really do. Yeah, you really do. But yeah. Oh, I'd also want to put a plug in for your local library, audiobooks, free audiobooks, sign up to your local library and get the apps and you can listen to the audiobooks on using them. So big plug for local libraries there as
How
well.
good are libraries? I honestly,
I
I'm
know.
so glad you brought that up, because I have rediscovered libraries since our son was born, because I started reading books to him, and it's actually made me want to read again as well. But I just rediscovered libraries because you can just go and get a whole load of new books every like
I know,
few weeks,
awesome.
and you don't have to buy them. And it's just like an amazing resource. And I love the local library here as well. We're so lucky we've got a great local library here in Winchester. And I know a lot of people might not have them. And this is the concern, is that like libraries might be disappearing. But what an
Oh,
amazing resource. I mean, it's honestly just I couldn't be with you anymore on that one. It's really
no.
ignited my passion for libraries in the last couple of years.
It's such a big community hub, and like I think also like whenever I tell any and like I can talk about books, but I'm always like if you can't get to your library, download the apps. You can get ebooks, you can get audiobooks, you get e-magazines. Like my mother-in-law, I've totally got her into Homes and Gardens. She's like, I don't have to buy Homes and Gardens. I can look on my iPad with it. So I've totally got her into it as well. I'm absolutely obsessed. I think people probably think I talk about it too much, but genuinely, if you haven't got a subscription to your library or a library card, you should definitely go in
Nice. There's a plug for the local libraries.
there.
Um,
But why is there a surge in people? Okay, this is the UK Doc podcast.
Talking about Ivan, I just thought about my love of libraries basically being stimulated by my son, who's 3. You've got a child as well, 7 years old, is that right?
He's 7. He's a little menace, but yeah, he's 7. And he
Oh,
does something at the
nice,
moment. Yeah. And
nice.
so that's another source of great fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that is, I guess, as much as anything, a distraction from anything, because they occupy your
Yeah.
attention, kids, don't they?
They do, and it also changes the priorities, and I think that definitely was something that also impacted. Thinking, oh, I've got to keep myself well and healthy. I'm dependent now to become a husband. So like, I've got to be good, for him, and he's fantastic. He's a little ball of energy, and I rarely get any sleep. He's slept through the night. He's 7 now, maybe 3 or 4 times in his whole entire life. So it's
I don't want to hear that.
hard work.
Got 3 there. I was expecting one day it'd be okay.
Oh, well, I don't know. I hear when they're teenagers it gets better, but at the moment I think you've got 2
I
years.
think when they're teenagers, doesn't it just, I say they as if like we never were one, but doesn't it just go the other way at teenagers that they never want to get out of bed?
Yeah, but I think I'll probably be more grateful for that, to be honest, because at the moment I just feel like I haven't slept for 7.5 years. I've just been awake, running on coffee, like other things. But it's just it's hard work. It's just a lot of energy, totally worth it. And so I'm hoping that you don't have to wait till teen years or at least but I suspect I will have to. He's just constantly thinking, just I don't know where he gets it from, but constantly thinking, and so I just don't think he actually rests. He just like bam, always on.
Well, this is a good way to kind of loop back to what I wanted to ask earlier, when we were talking about the educational side of it and kind of medical students coming through and being in these high pressure situations. Because in some ways, I wonder whether mental health struggles become more prevalent in medical students because that is particularly high pressure scenario they're placed in at quite a young age. And it not limited to the medical profession, but any profession where as a young person, you're thrust in at a young age and forced to deal with really high, like emotional highs and lows, and you're kind of being pulled around and you're exposed to higher pressure than you might otherwise be in other jobs, or at least higher pressure situations than you're maybe geared up for, prepared for. I wanted to ask you, with your kind of educational hat on, around how well we prepare young people. I mean, we've both got kids, and a lot of my thinking is like, how am I prepping my son kind of and equipping him with the mental skills to be able to manage in the world? And I've been fortunate that through sport, which is another industry actually that drags you through massive emotional highs and lows at quite a young age. But I was fortunate that we were given support with a psychologist, and you understand some strategies to manage these things and manage your mind and understand how your mind operates. But do you think there's something and there's more we can do with children of a younger age as they're coming up through school, making it part of the syllabus and factoring it into their day-to-day lives? And I think it is better than it used to be, but I'd love to hear your take on that and how it can equip young people better for the world that they live in today.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's really important. I think one thing that I've tried to instill in my son, that you can, it's important at any age, is that any worry can be discussed. And I might not have a solution to the worry, but just sharing it out. And I think, and it doesn't have to be me. It can be his dad, or it can be his older cousins, or it can be his nanny, or whoever it happens to be. And he will frequently choose different people to discuss different things with. And again, I think that loops back to having more than one person that you can necessarily be somebody that you talk to. And I think that's really important. I think, one thing I love about my little boy's school, like they have like a worry box, and you can write down your worry and then put it in the box. And then the head teacher reads them, and she can come and chat to you about the worry. And I just think that's lovely. And my son was telling me about what he'd written, and it was that he was worried he was going to fall over and hurt his bottom on the ice, which was very odd. I was like, where did that come from? About 2 years ago, he stepped out the car door, and onto the pavement, and he slipped over and fell on the ice. And 2.5 years later, and I should be probably very grateful that this is what he's worrying about and not something more serious. But he's still worrying about it in the height of summer. And that
you never know in this country when the cold snap's gonna hit.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think, and it's really nice. And he didn't tell me before he wrote it. He wrote it, and then I don't. To be fair, I don't even know when he wrote it, but he just happened to bring it up and said, "Oh, I wrote this story and put it in the box." And we chatted. I chatted to teacher about it, and we said, you could hold a hand when you get out of the car, and came up with strategies. And I just thought that's just really, really nice. Like, I had no idea it was playing on his mind. And to be fair, knowing him, it's something that just came to his head at that time, even though it happened 2.5 years prior. But he was able to discuss that with somebody he knew where to go. So I think it is about signposting. These are the available options. You don't have to use all of them. You don't have to use more than one, but try and use one if you can. And then later you can use the second one. So use me later, obviously. And I think that's probably a generational thing. more than anything else. As you know, we're getting more aware of these issues. Just knowing where to look, I think, is probably important. Which is why I really like things like your OK Doc, because they don't just talk about their own charity, but they say, there's this place and this place and that you can go to and reach out to, and whatever suits you best. And that's certainly something I try and do with my own patients. So all the adolescents that I see, we have little cards that have lots of different organisations, not just one, that they might feel they can help with. And a lot of these organisations have apps, which I think is much more approachable for these young people. And then going on, as we talk about medical students, the whole point of this conversation, I suppose, one of the points, is that they have a range of services that they are aware of, rather than just there's no point having services out there if nobody knows about them. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, really.
Yeah, it's interesting about the generational change. I think there's certainly a real value that I think is a positive shift at the moment around normalizing the conversation around some of this stuff. So factoring it into the day-to-day for young people so that they are way more aware probably than certainly I was growing up, but particularly older generations, of their own minds and what might work or what might benefit them and be healthy and what might not. And even at young age, as you say, at school, if they're able to learn strategies, I mean, that's such a cool example that you shared with your son, where by writing something down, it basically like unlocked that kind of fear that he was harboring, and then allowed him to take the next step, which was talking it through and sharing it. And I just think that is just such a great lesson for all of us. And I know this is, journaling is now very popular and spoken about, and for good reason, because it is that act of creating some distance between some thoughts which we might not be serving us very well. By putting them down on a page, you are creating that sort of separation and reminder that you are not your thoughts, and that is sometimes the first step to being able to just process that and move on with that, and for it not to become a greater and greater problem. So I love that story. It sounds like your son is nailing it. We should have got him on the podcast.
Oh gosh, you wouldn't have got a word in edgeways with that one, can you? And it would all be about Pokemon. Everything's Pokemon. So really? I'm surprised the worry wasn't that he hasn't managed to collect every single Pokemon card in the whole wide world yet. So yeah, it's obsessed.
Isn't it amazing? Pokemon's still going. Like, that was cool. I mean, it's been going for years. That was like cool when I was young. Although I was never into it, weirdly. I was like the odd one out. I just didn't get it. Never into the Pokemon cards.
I wasn't. Well, it wasn't really, but yeah, my son definitely is. He loves anything Pokemon. He looks like the Pokemon's vomited on him.
Great description. Just moving on to another thing that you do.
To come, by the way, Tom.
Yeah, I know. At the moment, he's got
Bluey, I bet.
No, he's not into Bluey. He's not really into that. He likes watching. In terms of things he likes watching, Octonauts is a big fave at the moment. He likes Paw Patrol, but we don't watch Paw Patrol. But I think at his preschool, Paw Patrol is like big currency, so they always play Paw Patrol, but he didn't really watch it. He still knows what that is. Spider-Man, for some reason, has been a thing recently, but he's never seen Spider-Man. Doesn't know what that is, I don't think. But I think, again, someone older than him is... Yeah. But yeah, we're sort of moving past the dinosaurs. He loves cars. That's his big thing at the moment. So yeah, we just have traffic jams lined up around our house at all times. It's really, really annoying. It's actually a real hazard for my dodgy ankles and knees. Like, it's only a matter of time before I'm at A&E. Anyway, fingers crossed that doesn't happen. Enough about my son's interests. That's not why people are here.
I mind, yeah.
Just moving on to something, and we're absolutely racing through this, through the time we've got for this recording. But one other thing I want to touch on is the work you do with women and mothers in medicine, and the kind of self-care that you promote and encourage women to do. Can you just, I guess just tell us a little bit about that, how that came to be, and the kind of the forum you use to support women in that space?
Yeah, it's more about advocating for our choices over kind of aesthetics and the way we present ourselves. And I think it's just something that I just think is really important in terms of how we present ourselves. So yeah, I'm not going to say much more about it because it's like a secret thing for us just to be able to advocate for what we would like. So I'm not going to say I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. No, absolutely. That is, I think it's just another example of, well, which is why I think it's fascinating, the different areas you work in, which are all supporting other people, and all that has been made possible because you have found ways to sort of set your life up to support yourself. And I think there's just, yeah, I mean, firstly, massive respect, but also I just think it's a great example for people, because generally people who are in the medical profession have an interest in helping others, right? And that's largely why people are in it. And yet, in order to do so, you kind of, the work starts with yourself, right? The work starts at home. And if you're able to set yourself up in a certain way, you can then really do the work of helping others. And it doesn't mean that it's all going to be plain sailing and smooth, but I just think reminding, if maybe this is a moment of the pod where you just remind people that like check in where you're at, the ability to top up your own cup before you start to pour for others is a really important thing. And actually, one last thing just to dive into before we kind of start to wrap up, but around like pressure situations. Now, pressure is, I guess, subjective to a degree, but I always think working in the clinical setting especially must be full of pressure moments, whether that's, just having a conversation with someone might be a pressure moment, or, if you're actually doing a procedure or whatever it is. Have you kind of got any specific kind of, I guess, tips or strategies that you use for yourself around those high pressure moments? So when you're really feeling like the heat is on, and what you do and where you go to in those moments?
Every time. And this is probably, I mean, my OCD is probably going to come through on this one, but yeah, structure every time. I mean, there's a reason why, with all our, I instruct on a lot of the life support courses and things. There's a reason why you go back to the same structure, and it's not just for your own, for people to know, everybody be on the same page. It's for your own ability to calm and work through each step. So, like you're saying, like with a procedure, getting if I'm going to unique equipment, getting my equipment out. I know it's going to be a tough procedure. I know lots of people have tried it and they've struggled with it, or whatever it happens to be, or the child is really upset. And, you've got one chance, otherwise they're going to kick off and you're never going to be able to go anywhere near them again. Getting that tray out and being like, right, need my equipment in this order. This is what I'm going to reach for first. Then I'm going to reach for the second, third, fourth, fifth. Right. Calm. I've got that methodical way of working through. Same with the resuscitation. Any medic will know you go A to E, and when you're looking at somebody who's unwell, there's a certain structure that every medic, nurse, health professional will use and go through so that you can recognize somebody doing it. But also, it's a really good way of slowing yourself down and being able to think through things in a very methodical, calm, structured way, rather than haphazardly, chaotically. And I think, when I teach my medical students, I say, well, if you're in that exam, we have this really wide question, like, what is your differential diagnosis, which essentially means, give a suggestion of different types of diagnoses this might be. Don't just throw your first rare example at the examiner from the top of your head. Have a structure, and your structure can be diagnoses by age. It can be diagnoses by body systems, so heart problems, lung problems, tummy problems, etc. But have the same structure that you use every single time. It calms you down. It makes you have a logical thought process, and you come across in a structured way, which I think in exams, the examiner wants to see, the examiner wants to hear, the examiner wants to be able to follow what you're trying to say. So that would be the biggest thing, I think, across a lot, lots of things, procedures, resuscitations, exams, just have a structure that works for you. And I think that's probably similar in lots of different aspects of life. I'm sure in rugby, which I won't pretend I know a huge amount about, you have a structure that you work through. Your warm-ups in a certain way, in a certain structure, the way that you approach the beginning of the game. You will have a pre. Help me out here, pre.
Oh, keep going. No, I'm leaving you to flounder. No, keep going.
Yeah, just let me drown.
No, you're absolutely right. You're bang on. And I think, do you know, one thing that really stood out for me when you're explaining that kind of reliance on the structure and the process to, I guess, ground you in the moment is, because I guess I'll talk through like how I feel sometimes in those pressure moments, is that you are feels like your wheels are spinning, the thoughts are whirring so fast, and like often in those moments your heart rate can start to rise. And what I have done when I've tried to then go back to my process is that I've like rattled through the process at the same rate as my heart rate's pumping at, which is then not useful. And the key thing that you said, I think, when you were like about taking your time going through the process and the structure and like checking your equipment or whatever it is, or checking the process, because if you can do that at the speed that you would if you weren't in that pressure situation, it's then going to kind of ground you. Whereas, like, for example, when I was there was a time, you know, on occasion where I'd be taking a kick at goal and heart's racing, and I'd have you only have 30 seconds to take the kick as well, so there's a bit of time pressure of fatigue, and the pressure of like, what if I miss? That's the main pressure. And I had like a process, so I would have certain check off points in my head that were all about technique. So it would be, I'd repeat those to myself, and that was kind of what I used as a scaffold, I suppose, around the pressure moments. But the problem was I had like 4 or 5 triggers, and I would like catch my breath. That'll take 10 seconds. And then I try and reel off these triggers in my head that would probably take like 10 to 15 seconds. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh God, I'm running out of time here. So actually all I've done was I'd actually increased the amount of pressure on myself by sort of having a process that didn't serve me that well. And I remember I kind of just basically decluttered that process, and it allowed me to do that process at a time that was of my choosing. And it's kind of, I then regained ownership over the process rather than the other way around. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think that's it. It's like, make sure your process or your structure is actually serving you and tailor it accordingly. So I don't even like, I don't know whether this is silly, but like creating you'll have a kind of technical process that you'll have to stick to around certain procedures. Let's just take a procedure, for example, you're laying out your equipment. You know, there might be something where you've got nicknames for the different bits. I don't know, like something like that, which becomes a personal trigger. Is that totally stupid? It probably is. But something that personalizes the process.
Cannulas, but yeah.
You know what I mean? You personalize the process that it becomes yours, and what you're doing there is, I guess, and you'll know better than me, but you're creating a trigger in your brain, so that in the pressure situation you're creating an anchor or a trigger that brings you back to a state that is useful for you in that moment, rather than being carried away by your kind of anxiety, emotional response to the pressure, and as a result your physical response to the pressure.
Absolutely. Tom, I think you're absolutely right. And I suppose that is, I mean, the issue with that, and I think it relates a lot back to my OCD as well. It's got to be healthy strategies, and it's got to be things that you are able to deviate from if necessary, and that's really, really important. So I think it's probably a problem that medics run into, because we do like the structure, it does serve us well when it works, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I guess part of that must be feeling the power to deviate from the structure when you need to, and that comes with time and sometimes some help of understanding your own like sense of self and self-belief. And that's not something that we probably naturally, or most of us, we probably don't grow up with loads of that naturally necessarily, especially when we're going through, you know, teenage years and early 20s, when the world's like, you know, a cool place but potentially a scary place, and socially there's a lot of pressures and there's all sorts to unpack. So then actually, if we can understand our sense of self and our value being not reliant on our job, our ability to do our jobs, or what other people think of us and all that sort of stuff, then that can really help underpin the kind of the structure and the process that you're then going to put in place.
And you don't have to be perfect every time.
Absolutely. That is a great bit of advice on which to probably wrap up our conversation. I mean, other than, you know. No, hey, for me, that's a great reminder. That's a big one for me. I've always kind of carried through this desire to be perfect in a lot of situations, and not only is it unrealistic, it's also not useful. And it's okay if that's part of your psyche, because it can really drive you to do some cool stuff. And fine if that's part of your, you know, motivation, if that's been something that you've grown up with, you can still use it, but as long as you're aware of it and understand that that's not in the driving seat, because you can quickly become unstuck. So yeah, Kiran, thanks for that reminder for me personally, but for also anyone else listening who needs the reminder that it's not about being perfect at work or in any area of life. Right. And that is just one of many great reminders you've given us, alongside the importance of team, understanding who your people are, that it might not just be one person, there might be other people who are the right people for you to reach out to. Having the courage to make change if you feel that's something that you need, and using the people around you to help make the change, and also sharing the worry, which was a bit of advice that came partly from you, but mostly from your 7-year-old son. So thanks to him as well.
You'll be very
really, really interesting chat. Dr. Kiran Bains, thanks so much for joining us on the YOD Pod.
You're very welcome, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.